right, so let's get right into it, ladies and gentlemen. The media is absolutely losing its mind over the revelation that President Trump's security team used a decoy plane after a reported threat against his life. And somehow, instead of the story being, thank God the Secret Service took the threat seriously, we've got hosts laughing, CNN clutching its pearls, and people acting like the security operation itself is the scandal. But then something happened on MS Now that completely blew up the entire narrative because a former Democratic senator admitted the quiet part out loud. And ladies and gentlemen, once she said that, the whole media meltdown started looking very different. Watch this.
If they had disclosed this after the fact, then I think everyone would be a little more comfortable with it. The fact that we're finding out from deep sourced folks that this has happened is probably not great. But they were trying, I think there's probably was a credible threat. And I don't think anybody would argue that Iran would like, we took out their entire senior leadership of their country. And they are extremists. And Trump is their number one enemy. So I understand why they would go to extraordinary lengths to try to protect him if it really was a credible threat. If we had a Democratic president in the same position, I think all of us would say, well, you know, I'm glad they figured out a way to protect the president better. Just because it's Donald Trump and we think he's a horrible president, we should keep in mind that the president's protection is important for our country. And it would be a terrible thing for any president to be assassinated, especially by a foreign government.
Facts. If it would have been a Democrat president, then they would have not been overreacting the way they are right now. They're reaching in and grasping for straws because it's President Trump, and they want to change the narrative. They want to move the goalposts. They want to make it something that is not. That's what's happening right now, ladies and gentlemen. Reality is, it shouldn't matter who's in office as far as things go. Foreign enemy trying to take out your president, that's not something you should ever take lightly or stand for. As a media, as a country. Doesn't matter if they're Democrat or Republican. Yeah, we can have our arguments that go back and forth as far as how, you know, things are going, how governing is going. But it's some things that are bigger than that, and you got to have the foresight to be able to see. Your enemies taking shots at the leader of the free world, at the leader of the America, the nation that every other country looks towards, and then you actually have that leader get taken out. You don't want that to happen, no matter who's in office. And the fact that you got the media laughing like they are on MS Now, I mean, it really shows how pathetic they are. But check out this. Take a listen.
Now I'm very pleased to say it's time for the last word with Lawrence O'Donnell, which is more of a pleasure for me to say than usual because the New York Times has just posted a headline on the front page of the New York Times website, which reads, "Trump hid in a catering container to sneak out of Turkey." And honestly, that news has just broken. Trump hiding in a catering cart. And the thing I want most in the world upon hearing that news is to hear Lawrence O'Donnell explain it to me. And God bless you, Lawrence. Please tell me that you will.
It is issue number one in this hour of coverage. We're going to be relying on the Washington Post that broke the story a couple hours before the New York Times.
These people are sick. I mean, really think about that for a second. I'm just sitting here like really thinking about it as I'm speaking with you guys, and I do have my thoughts, but just think about that for a moment. His security team, Secret Service, it must have been a level of threat that had a level of credibility to it where this is the steps, this is the protocol they decided was necessary to take. I'm sure they didn't have, you know, as many options as they probably like. It might have been one of those situations where this is the best, worst option, but, you know, it's all they have at the time. Who knows? But they had to do that because it was a credible threat, we have to assume, because why go through all of that, obviously? And you have, who's this? What's this lady name? Rachel Meadows or whoever? Laughing about the situation, giggling, like something is actually funny, as if there haven't been other threats on the president's life in the past. So we could just make light of it because, oh, he's not a Democrat. They don't like the way he governs. They think that he is Hitler. They believe all these things. And so, yeah, it's okay to laugh about, him perhaps being assassinated. These people are absolutely sick. Go ahead and check this out, because while Rachel Meadows is laughing as far as because the president and the lengths they had to go in order to ensure, his safety, take a listen to the lengths they had to go to ensure his safety. Check this out.
Newsroom, we begin with a remarkable new twist to a story already full of them. New reporting in the Washington Post about the president's return from the NATO summit in Turkey, which already included a change of planes, with the president, or so we thought, taking his old blue 747 for the first leg of the trip, instead of this new Qatari gift, red 747, which he boarded for the second leg from England back to the U.S. Now, we were told at the time it was to give troops in England a better look at the new plane, which had left Turkey earlier. That wasn't true, and everybody knew it wasn't true at the time. The switch was for security reasons, and now the Post is reporting that the threat was so severe, there was a second switch onto a third plane. The president was not on this plane at all. Instead, according to the Post, even as members of the press were boarding from the rear door, the president, who we just showed you climbing the front steps, was leaving the plane, leaving on one of these. Quoting now from the Post, he was secretly shuttled minutes later to a smaller plane, an Air Force C-32A, via an airport catering truck typically used to load meals and other supplies pre-flight, according to U.S. official and corroborating material reviewed by the Post.
Those were the lengths that they had to go in order to keep the president safe, that they felt were necessary in order to make sure that, obviously, he didn't fall victim to an assassination attempt. But that didn't stop certain clowns in the media from still speaking about this and actually saying idiotic things as only they would. And so that cues in Jake Tapper. Take a listen to this clown, ladies and gentlemen. CNN's Jake Tapper, and he says, let me go ahead and just read this. He posted on X. The job of the government staffers and journalists is not to serve as decoys when there's a credible threat requiring the primary to surreptitiously be exfiltrated from the vehicle. Well, no kidding, genius, but the number one priority when you decide that this is your job, Jake Tapper, you're a journalist, is that you understand, above all else, the president will be the number one person who they're going to prioritize. This is not anything new. It doesn't matter if it's a Democrat or Republican, the president will always be the number one priority. And the security, the people in charge, the ones who are making a call, whatever they have available as far as plans and options, that's what they're going to use. And so whether in the past something like this has ever been done is irrelevant, because each individual situation can be different, point blank, period. Someone responded with, anyone who's ever worked with an elected principal who has security knows this. There's one job is to protect the principal. Their one job is to protect the principal, not staffers or self-righteous reporters who suddenly discover they weren't the priority. Exactly. Then he goes on to add, I guess he's trying to validate what he's saying, flew to Afghan with different presidents on Air Force One, and insurgent missile struck Bagram runway before landing. Weather was bad, so plane Marine one trip to Kabul scrub. We were with president the whole time. Our safety wasn't treated any differently from his. We were never decoys. Well, that was then, this is now. No two situations are alike. Just because it was one way leading up to a point with other presidents doesn't mean that's the way it's always going to be. You guys always love to talk about how President Trump is uniquely different and there's never a president like President Trump. So guess what? I guess they got to take different measures. Now what? Tries to clean it up by saying, obviously, the life of the president is paramount and previous White Houses have used deception to protect the president's life. But no officials I've spoken to have ever before heard of using an Air Force One full of White House staff and journalists as a decoy during an imminent threat. None of that matters. You're not the priority. Get your head out your ass and stop thinking that it's about you. You signed up for the job. That's what it really comes down to. But let's keep it going back to CNN with a former Biden's former White House official. And so check this out.
I will say, as somebody who is a staffer that traveled with Biden on Air Force One, I'm okay with the security protocols because Secret Service would not do something like this unless it was very, very credible. But what was going to be the plan with the real life staffers and the media that were on the plane as a decoy? That to me feels like another piece of this that's a bit left out. But look, Republican president, Democratic president, it doesn't matter. I don't want to see our president killed by a foreign nation.
I think that really should have been the headline rather than the media, where you got MS Now hosts laughing and CNN sitting here melting down. The headline should have just been Secret Service uses unorthodox or extreme measures, whatever it is, in order to keep president safe. That should have been it. But no, because it's President Trump, as former Democrat senator put it, this is how they're reacting. If it was a Democratic president, the media would not be overreacting and reaching the way they are.
Yeah, I actually interviewed today a guy named Patrick Sullivan, who's a 23-year veteran of the Secret Service and spent 4 years on the Presidential Protective Detail. And I asked him that question, do you consider this to be decoy? That's the word that's being used. He disagreed with that assessment. He didn't think that characterization was fair because there were agents and staff on that plane. And so there were certainly people who would have been possibly in the know about the plan that was unfolding to protect the president. So that was his characterization based on his knowledge of how presidential movements work. To me, the most important issue here is you got to keep the president safe. This man faces threats in domestic airspace, on the ground here in the United States, especially when you're overseas. He has to be kept safe. And you want the commander-in-chief to be able to go to NATO meetings and represent the country at the same time. To go through everything they went through, all this deception and all this stuff, I agree with Beth. They must have had some really specific and very troubling intelligence. It sounds like it could have been from the Israelis, that his life was in danger. So I'm fully in support of them taking any action necessary to keep the president safe. That has to be the number one priority.
Yeah, facts. The number one objective is keeping the president of the United States protected, alive, safe. Not just President Trump, but just the president of the United States safe. We don't want foreign enemies taking out our leader. Like, I'm sorry, do we not realize like what that looks like as far as on the grand stage globally, if that was to happen, and why it's so important that you prioritize the president's safety, especially at a time when there's been multiple attempts on him already. And that's been obviously domestic. And so that's one thing. But then it becomes a whole nother thing when it's your enemy. And I mean, hey, it's not like they wouldn't have a reason to want to do it. We did pretty much take out all of their leadership, basically, as far as things go. And so there would be great reason for Iran, for them to be like, hey, if we see an opportunity in order to attack, in order to get them, then they're going to take it. Let's go ahead and get back to Scott Jennings. Take a listen.
Well, I think he's talking about military nation-state capabilities. And I think it's possible what the intelligence said was, you got one guy with a shoulder-fired rocket. That's totally different than saying we've degraded their Air Force or we've degraded their national air defense capabilities. But are there going to be people in the Middle East with shoulder-fired rockets? Probably, now and forever. And that's, no matter how many wars you win and no matter how badly you pummel Iran into the ground, which we have pummeled them badly, I suspect those kinds of threats are always going to be real. And thank God we have an ally over there that can find out about it and tell us about it, which they apparently did in this case.
Yeah, and so there you have that. And so whatever the Secret Service decided to do, it was necessary for that particular scenario. And you can't compare it to other scenarios in the past like Jake Tapper was attempting to do. Ultimately, when you put yourself in those positions where you decide you're going to be a government staffer, you're going to work in media and, be that close to the president, then listen, these people know what comes with that job. And sure, you don't want it to come to that. Nobody wants it to be a situation where their lives are actually put at risk, but you're not the priority in this situation. It'd be nice to say everybody should be treated equally as far as the priority, but that's not the reality as far as things go. It's not. Let's stop playing like we don't understand how this works. That's just the way it goes, ladies and gentlemen. Not pretty, but it's life, it's reality. That's all. But those are my thoughts in the update. Now it's time to hear from you. Drop your comments down below. Tell me what you think. Smash that thumbs up button if you do enjoy the content. For more, subscribe to the channel. And as always, until next time.